Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I want to start by explaining what learning without limits means to me. I want to share with you a story about something that happened to me when I was quite early on in my teaching career. My daughters, Catherine and Elizabeth, were at primary school, and I had taken some time out of teaching to study for my master's degree. And one morning I went to my daughter's school to pick up my daughter, and the head teacher of that school came out onto the playground and she said to me, "Mrs. Peacock, you're a teacher, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, well, the thing is, we've got Claudia in our school. You may have seen Claudia." Now, Claudia was a little girl, 7 years old, in a wheelchair. So I had seen Claudia. And the head teacher said, "Well, we've got some hours, some teaching hours for Claudia, and we didn't want to waste any money on an advert, so we thought we'd ask you if you would teach her for 3 hours a week." Now, I knew that Claudia was a child who'd had no speech, who could not walk, who had been in the school since she was in nursery, and the head teacher wanted me to teach her to read. Now, this was a huge challenge, because I don't know about you, but whenever I've tried to teach anybody to learn to read, I've never really known how they've done it. I've always been very grateful when they have, but I've never really understood what happened to enable the child to learn to read. And here I was being asked to teach a child to read who could not speak. This is a challenge, do you agree? So I thought about it, and at the time, my studies at Cambridge University were about early years and special educational needs. And I was reading all about the importance of inclusion. So I could hardly say, well, no, this is too difficult for me. So I decided to take on the role. And I started to work with Claudia. Now, what I rapidly found out, Claudia had a teaching assistant who was Spanish, Juliet. And Juliet and Claudia had a very good relationship together. Claudia loved to laugh. She would just laugh with a great ha 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 like this. And she had a great big smile, not many teeth, but a great big smile. And she could say, yeah, 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 yeah. And she could ask, why? And she could say, no. So very quickly, I realized I could communicate with Claudia, even though I did not yet know how to sign. Juliet could sign. So what started to happen was, I started to learn how to sign, and Claudia started to learn how to read. What we would do is Claudia, in her wheelchair, we would come out of the classroom and we would go up the corridor of this school. It was an old-fashioned school with lots of windows, all looking out onto the corridor all the way along. And at the end of the corridor, up some steps, inconveniently, were all the reading books. And those of you who work with young children will know that one of the most exciting things when you're learning to read is changing your book. So I wanted Claudia to come with me to go and change the book every day. So we would go up the corridor, she'd be in her wheelchair, we would be laughing and joking, and we would change her book. As she started to read, I could tell that she was reading because she was signing. She was becoming more and more confident. Because she had a teacher, the rest of the school, for the first time, started to notice Claudia, because Claudia had never been any trouble. Claudia had always been very quiet, and her teaching assistant, at that time, teaching assistants were not allowed in the staff room, so her teaching assistant, Juliet, had no voice either. But Claudia began to be more and more part of the school. She became more confident. The school bought her a computer. She started to use the computer during lessons. Out on the playground at lunchtime, children would come to her and ask her to sort out their arguments, because she always listened really carefully, and she might say, "Why?" Or she might disagree. And when things went well, she would laugh and she would say, "Yeah, And the children began to love Claudia. Now, as she became more confident, she became more courageous. And the next time she went to the hospital, they gave her a walking frame, like a Zimmer frame. And so she would come out of the classroom with her frame, and we would walk very slowly up the corridor, her with her frame, laughing and joking, to go and change her reading book. Until the day came when we were in the classroom, we got up, and Claudia was like this to her frame, and she stood on her own. And then she took her first ever steps. She walked to the edge of the classroom, and the children in the classroom looked round and started to applaud her because Claudia was walking on her own. And we came to the door of the classroom, we came out of the door, and we came along the corridor, and as the children looked out of their class,